Hej allihopa där hemma. Det här blir en favorit i repris då vi sitter här på sista dagen av Mid-Season Invitational och jag är här med ingen mindre än Christopher, MonteCristo och Mykles som har kommenterat majoriteten av hela eventet. Hi Monty.
Hi. I still don't know what you say at the beginning of those things.
Again, it's just like the worst thing that you could ever imagine. How are you doing?
I'm great. Here in my SK Telecom jersey, about to watch the finals. It's probably come out after the finals, so maybe I'll look really stupid for wearing this jersey. I don't know. Should be close. Should be some close games.
Did you expect Fnatic to even take a game off of SKT yesterday?
No, absolutely not. I thought it was going to be a 3-0, especially based on some of their performance in the groups. I know Fnatic looked like they were slowly getting stronger over the course of the tournament, and the first game against SKT was close. But no, I certainly didn't expect it to go to 5 games.
Yeah. So I mean, like, what does that then? What kind of picture does that paint for you going into the finals now, since EDG completely stomped AHQ yesterday?
I think that SK Telecom was playing below their normal level. And I think that there was a bit of overperformance from Fnatic, even though Fnatic has been, I mean, we've seen them improve since they got their new roster pretty consistently. I think that if we see the SK Telecom that showed up in Fnatic Game 5, then the series should be very close against EDG, and I don't know which way it will go. If we see the SK Telecom that showed up in Game 2 against Fnatic, I think EDG will 3-0. Okay. So they really need to play their absolute best, because I think that EDG has maybe individually their players might be a little bit better, but SK Telecom has significantly better teamwork and strategy. So, and that is a little bit more important, but EDG is obviously a very talented team as well.
So, did you think that maybe Fnatic's performance then yesterday is sort of like, you know, when they faced Najin in Season 3 Worlds, when it went to 5 games as well? Like, do you draw parallels to something like that? I think Fnatic legitimately played much better than I thought. I don't think anybody really, none of the analysts, I mean, talking to all of the casters here, we really didn't think that Fnatic was going to show up, because their playoff run was honestly pretty questionable. The finals were not very polished play. In the semis, they were running that absolutely god-awful Smite Lisa in top lane, so there were some questions about their strategy as well, so the fact that they did show up was really cool, and it made a great series, and I certainly am very impressed now with what they've shown, because especially if you think about their strategies in the top lane Cassiopeia, I think that was particularly well suited against TSM. So I think this time you could see a lot of very clever forethought from the team. Yeah. They really looked a lot more refined than we've seen in the past. I mean, last time we talked, you know, you said that it's just like a little tangent, but you said that you've been able to like successfully predict the two best, like the 2 winners of Worlds 2 years in a row. And going into this event, you said TSM was without a doubt the best team in the West. So I mean, like, yeah, see, I'm just building it up here. Like, and obviously they actually ended up going out second last place. Like, what can you even say about that? What happened?
I mean, I don't know. First off, I think there were a couple things about TSM. To me, it didn't look like they were prepared for the meta that ended up being very important in this tournament, right? It didn't look like they were as good at playing the Rek'Sai, which, as we saw, became a more and more important pick. Obviously, Azira and Cassiopeia, even teams like Fnatic and like EDG that didn't play these champions in their playoffs, whereas we saw SK Telecom and CJ playing them quite a bit, which I think were the 2 top teams in Korea as we went into the end of the season. And so these picks have had to be picked up by the other teams, right? And TSM just doesn't play those champions. And then, not to mention that TSM did look very strong and very well prepared for all of their LCS playoff games. And you could see how intelligent their lane swap strategies were. This time, their lane swapping was absolutely atrocious. There was not really any redeeming macro play. And then I think we saw, especially at the international level, how weak individually some of their players are when compared to world-class counterparts. And even Fnatic was able just to kind of beat them through raw laning skill and Reignover's jungling. So I think that TSM is a team that prepares well. But I've always said this too, that if there's something weird that they don't expect, like if we think about TSM in the past year, and whenever somebody pulls out a surprise pick, like the Cassiopeia top,
or the Twisted Fate Jungle from Unicorns of Love, or the Swain at Worlds against SK, they kind of fall apart. They're really good at adapting between games, but there's something about their shot calling inside of the game. They can't adapt on the fly. So if something weird comes up in picks and bans, they just don't have a plan, and they can't make a plan within the game to deal with it. Because obviously it was pretty clear that if you just camp the Cassiopeia in the long lane, you can kill her and maybe win the game. But they didn't do that at all. And so it was, especially against Fnatic, it was pretty bad. But they got smashed in all of their matches besides against Besiktas. So I think there were a lot of factors. It took a total meltdown for this to occur, right? Poor preparation, poor pick and ban, especially in this meta, and reliance on champions that I don't think suit TSM's playstyle. If they want to do well internationally, like Bjergsen, I think has to be on a champion he can carry on, and Cho'Gath is not that champion. They're unprepared with how to deal with strong top laners, because NA actually has a very weak talent pool in terms of top lane players, so they haven't really seen how teams can snowball against them in the top lane before. And this is true even in the LCS. And if we go back to my predictions about why Impulse would beat TSM, I said, well, there's a strong top jungle synergy, and I'm concerned that I thought that the team that had the best chance to beat TSM was going to be Impulse in the playoffs, because I thought they would be able to snowball off of Impact. Now, it didn't happen, but it really happened here. So that same weakness that I saw earlier was exploited here. Yeah, so just, and then individual underperformance from the players. It was just kind of a terrible run across the board, and everyone, I think, is quite surprised, because certainly the team that competed in the NALCS playoffs just failed to show up here.
So you, like, an opinion was perhaps that maybe it was the same team that showed up, but just because they were playing against, you know, like NA teams, maybe they just got exposed in that way. Do you agree with that at all, or do you think that there's a clear difference between playoffs TSM and this TSM?
I think there is a clear difference. Even if you look at the way they do lane swaps, and they were just very lackadaisical this time, whereas everything against Cloud9 was very tightly prepared. So I'm not sure what happened, but yeah.
How do you look at NA overall then now with TSM then? I mean, like, you know, getting to sit in the corner right now just because of the performance, and then also the big news of Incarnation joining Cloud9. I mean, like you said, that Bjergsen is a guy that has to carry. Do you think that Cloud9 maybe will adapt a similar sort of style now with having Incarnation, who's been built up to be this super mid?
I mean, I don't really know anything about Incarnation, because I don't go around watching like EU solo queue VODs. I've never seen him play, so all I know is his reputation. But certainly, yeah, I think it'll help out Cloud9 to have a much stronger mid laner, and I'm excited to see what he can do. There's a lot of hype. Obviously, playing the professional game on a team is a lot different, but then again, Incarnation spent a lot of time at the SK Gaming House, coaching them and seeing that kind of environment. So I think you should have some confidence that he'll be able to fit into that environment, because he's been dealing with pro teams and seeing how they operate in game for a long time. So I'm sure he's going to be a good pickup, and we'll see how he does with the rest of the team. It may take some time for them to figure it out with that much of a different style of play, but so they may have some troubles at the start of the season, but I think they should even out as time goes on.
I mean, if we then look back towards this tournament, I guess the big story has been, aside from TSM then going out, has also, and Fnatic. I mean, it was obviously AHQ and EDG performing as well as they have, and like, before we then focus on the grand finals, AHQ really surprised a lot of people, and I don't know how involved you are in watching any of the games from that region overall, but like, did you see this coming?
No. I did think that basically, I don't know if I ever made these predictions public, but my feeling was that SKT, EDG, and TSM would make it out of groups, and then I didn't know whether Fnatic or AHQ would make out. I watched the LMS playoffs with AHQ to prepare for this event, obviously, and they were doing quite well. And you could see, I was concerned that Westor wasn't going to be able to do well because of his champion pool, and he's one of the few guys who actually managed to pull out the Fizz and the TF and kind of make it work. which was impressive. I still don't think it's good, but it's one of those times where if you are good enough on a specific champion, sometimes you can play it off meta, right? Pawn might play Fizz 2 in the finals today. I don't know. He's a Fizz player as well. So it was surprising, but I think that you can see there's a lot of individual talent there. And also, I think AHQ really clicked into gear late in the season. And AHQ was playing a lot of very tanky team compositions early on before Cinderhulk as well. So I think that this meta really, really favors their sort of play style. And I'm curious how they're going to do next season, because they're pretty mediocre in LMS for up until the playoffs when they went on that crazy run. So
you mentioned tank champions there, tanky champions at least, and then even before the Cinderhulk. But now, I mean, the biggest criticism levied towards the game right now is the obvious tank meta that's been put into place right now. And I mean, like, how do you view that overall from a viewing perspective, like casting analysis and all that stuff? Does it feel like the games just don't go anywhere, for the longest amount of time? Does it just feel boring? Do you feel like,
I think that this tournament has definitely not been boring. We've had so many ultra high kill games here, partially because of the teams that are in attendance, but it's just that the game is, I think Cinderhulk is interesting because you do get so much team fighting, and the emphasis around Dragon now as teams start to figure out how this Season 5 operates. It takes a long time because of the huge changes Riot makes to the game between seasons for teams to really optimize. So all this fighting that we're seeing occurring to get dragons and to get these barons and to start threatening the 5 stacks of the dragon has been really good for the game, I think. Personally, I really enjoyed this patch. It's very different. We really changed gears in terms of what was working earlier in the season, and we're seeing a lot of picks right now, huge amount of champions that are viable. So I think it's been quite exciting overall, yeah.
Something that the commentators pointed out a lot of times is that SKT obviously seems to be one of the teams that puts the most focus on the dragon more than any other objective overall. Like, do you feel like the dragon change is good in that sense, that like it kind of is this ticking clock that, okay guys, if we don't reach the 5th dragon and they do, we're going to be in a massive disadvantage? Do you enjoy that part of the game, or do you feel like it's sort of that it limits like how long a game can actually go on for? And
I think to a certain degree that yes, there is that threat that you have the 5 dragon stacks, but I think that there is a balance to this that some teams just haven't figured out yet, which is that especially you're getting percentage stats from the dragon, right? So the gold value of those stats early on in the game is really not very significant. And so if teams will start to figure out, I think, more and commit more to fast tower pushes and stuff like that in response, because you can get the more immediate gold from actually just killing towers. Yeah. So I think teams are too eager. They start to panic or focus too much on the dragon and take fights that they shouldn't. I mean, we saw SK Telecom doing that against Fnatic yesterday, when you could afford to give up a couple dragons, just take a turret or wait for your comp to scale into relevancy, right? Yeah. So we need to see more of that. I think teams, the emphasis on Dragon is partially because Dragon is very powerful once you start to get up there, because you can dictate how the game is closed, because they have to stop you from getting 4 or 5 dragons. But at the same time, teams like tunnel on that too much right now. So I think we'll start to see some more variable gameplay in a month or two.
So obviously the finals here, it's I mean, Korea's already won it since like 7 Koreans are in the final, I guess. But last time we talked, I asked you what you thought about the exodus of Korean talent into China, and it's obvious that EG has become a formidable team.
Absolutely.
And like, but I think that maybe from the LPL, I think most expectations were on OMG for having that, that completely star-studded a Chinese roster with like Uzi going, and I mean it didn't really pan out the way we expected it to. So like, maybe it's like too broad of a question, maybe it's too early to ask, but do you think that like any Chinese team that's just 5 Chinese and no Koreans actually has a chance of like taking a title internationally?
I think OMG has so many problems right now. They really lack an identity in terms of who their carries are and what their gameplay is. Their picks and bans have been a mess, so I really question their coaching as well. I think they have a lot of work to do. They certainly have the raw talent to be a very good team, so I wouldn't write them off quite yet, I think, but they've got a lot of refining to do, I think, before they're relevant. And I would love to see a full Chinese team, but there are only 2 full Chinese teams, I believe, left in the LPL right now, although I'm not entirely sure about that because I wasn't watching their qualifiers for the next season, but pretty much it was OMG and King last season that actually had the full Chinese rosters, so very few are even left to be competitive. So just based on numbers alone, it seems unlikely that they're going to be as successful as, say, EDG or LGD or IG or maybe even WE next season.
Do you think that that's something? Because I know that fans in general, they always want to like support their own home teams. You know, like people love Cloud9 for that reason, that it was 5 North American players and no imports. You know, do you feel like, are you a bit sad that perhaps like there'll come a time where almost like every team has a Korean player in it?
I think NA has to get used to it, but that's the reality of most professional sporting teams. If you look at the major leagues, then you're going to get players from all over the world because they have the money and the audience to draw the best talent. So it's not really any different from watching any professional sport, right? There are very few pro sports that have a team of only one nationality, unless we're talking the Olympics or something where it's mandatory, right? So, I mean, to me, it's kind of whatever. And it's not even surprising that European and Korean players are dominating in NA, because the fact of it is that the NA server and the NA player base is smaller than the Korean player base, and it's smaller than the European player base. So, of course, just in terms of the percentage of good players that are going to come out of those regions, then you're going to get more. And also, I think in Korea, the Koreans are so competitive, there's much more competition on the Korean server because people play more ranked. More of the server user base plays ranked games, so it's pretty natural that those would be the players that people would want to pick up because they're forged in the crucibles of the hardest scenes, right?
So with that said, then, do you think SKT will win it tonight?
I don't know. I think they were really inconsistent yesterday. I think if SKT. Yeah, the Game 5 SKT, because that's really what I expected from SKT versus Fnatic yesterday, was controlling their jungle, the deep wards, just slowly choking out Fnatic and just playing defensively and abusing their over-aggression. Yeah. And they really did, I mean, they destroyed Fnatic when they actually stood back and took a breather and played that way. It'll be harder to play that way against EDG because EDG, just right now, I mean, there are 3 rookies on Fnatic, and they're very good players, and it's very impressive what they've done. But EDG is still a more experienced team, and they are kind of pound for pound better than Fnatic, in my opinion, at the moment. And so it'll be harder to play that way. So I think if we see that SKT, I think we'll have a close 5-game series, 3-2 SKT. But if Bang's buying Avarice Blade first on Sivir and they keep trying to fight stupid dragons, then it may well be a 3-0 for EDG. They can't play that way. So I think EDG has been kind of. But EDG yesterday too against HQ, they were so reckless, like diving, making ridiculous tower dives instead of just taking the tower and then securing another objective. So it's such a hard series to call, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think if SKT plays up to their normal level and EDG plays at their normal level, because yesterday, even though they got the 3-0, it was still much sloppier than I'm used to seeing EDG play. So average levels, I think 3-2 SKT, just because I think they have a little bit of a strategic advantage, which more than makes up for the I think, slight individual skill gap.
Okay. So the final question, EasyHoon or Faker?
Well, EasyHoon is playing in Game 1, which doesn't surprise me at all. They played EasyHoon against EDG in the group stage. EasyHoon right now is the better Cassiopeia player. He's the better Azir player. He can play Ziggs. Faker actually has a pretty bad professional record on Ziggs and is nowhere near as good as EasyHoon is. Even though SK Telecom is yet to play Ziggs, it's always a threat. We saw it banned against SKT in the playoffs in Korea, even though they never played it. So these are some very strong champions in the current meta, and I think that just right now, because of the style of champions that SKT wants to play, EasyHoon is the better choice. Obviously, in an assassin meta, we'd be talking about something very different. And I think they might as well start with EasyHoon, especially because he is more reserved, and I think will play more defensively against and cautiously, generally speaking, against the more fast-paced style of EDG. So I think that he's the right choice here. Is he going to be the right choice forever? No. If I only had to have one, I'd take Faker for every meta, right? But this is really EasyHoon's time to shine, I think.
All right, then. I don't really have much more to add, so någonting sist du vill lägga till? Any final words?
Thanks for watching. Really enjoy doing these interviews. So, yeah, thanks a lot. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Go SKT.